If you retired tomorrow, would you still call yourself by your old job title? Would you still check your old work email just to see what's going on? Would you still think about a coworker that you haven't talked to in a year, wondering how they're doing or whether the project that you built together is still running the way you left it? There's no right answer to that, but how you answer it tells you something important about whether your retirement actually has a foundation under it or whether it's built entirely on top of a career that no longer exists. Today, I want to talk about the different ways that people react when they lose their career identity in retirement, why some of those reactions look healthy on the surface but actually aren't, and what to do about it, starting before you retire, not after, because by the time you notice the problem, you're already living inside of it. I've noticed that people fall into one of three different camps when it comes to their old career. So camp 1, they never really stop talking about it. Camp 2 is they never talk about it again, almost like it didn't happen. And then camp 3, which looks the healthiest, but is somewhere in between. I want to walk through all three today, because I think a lot of people assume that there is an obviously right way to handle this, but there isn't. Each of these three can be perfectly fine, and each of them can also be a warning sign. The difference isn't which camp you're in, it's actually what's underneath it. So let's get into it. The first group is the person who retires but never really leaves. They still refer to we when they talk about their old company, even 3 or 4 years later. They keep in touch with every single coworker, not just the 2 or 3 close friends. They read the industry newsletters. They know who got promoted, who got laid off, what the new product launch is, what the new leadership is doing differently than they would have done. So on its own, none of this is necessarily a problem. Staying connected to people and to an industry that you spent 30 years building a life around is completely normal. And honestly, it can be kind of nice. You don't have to erase 30 years of your identity just because you stopped clocking in. The problem really shows up when that connection isn't really a choice anymore. It's the only thing left standing. If every conversation, no matter where it starts, eventually loops back to the old job, if your sense of being useful, being respected, being someone is still coming entirely from a place that you don't work at anymore, that's not nostalgia at that point. That's an unfilled hole, and the career is just the last thing propping it up. I've heard retirees who 2 or 3 years in still describe their identity almost entirely through their old title. I was the regional vice president. Not I am. They know it's the past tense, but it's said with the exact same weight as if they still were, like the sentence hasn't caught up with the calendar yet. When I hear that, it's usually a sign that nothing has come in to replace what the career was providing. Structure, a reason to get up in the morning. And to be clear, it's not a character flaw. This is what happens when something that occupied 40, 50, 60 hours a week for 3 or 4 decades suddenly stops, and nothing else has been built to take its place. The mind doesn't just let go of that on its own. It holds on, because holding on is easier than facing the blank space underneath. Now the second group, it goes the opposite direction. When they retire, they're done. No looking back. They don't talk about the old job unless someone forces the topic. They don't keep up with anyone from the job. And sometimes they actively steer conversations away from it if it comes up at a family dinner or a holiday party. So this one gets praised a lot, by the way. Family members, they'll say things like, they really moved on, or they're so present in their retirement, and they never even mention work. And sometimes that's exactly what it is, genuine, healthy closure. Some people, they finish a chapter, they're simply finished. That's real, and it's not something to be suspicious of on its own. But sometimes it's avoidance wearing the costume of moving on. If 30 or 40 years of your life gets sealed off in a box and never discussed again, that's not automatically healthy. Sometimes it's someone who hasn't figured out what to do with all those years of built-up identity. So instead of sitting with that discomfort, they just close the door on it entirely and hope that it stays closed. So here's a simple test that I'd offer if you're trying to figure out which one this is for you or for someone that you love. If a person asks about your old career and you genuinely don't feel much of anything, no tension, you just don't have much to say, that's fine. That's real closure. But if the topic makes you tense, short with your answers, quick to change the subject, that's usually not indifference. That's something you haven't actually sat down and dealt with yet. It's just been avoided instead of resolved. And avoided things have a way of resurfacing later, usually at worse times than now. So the third group, they sit somewhere in the middle. They'll talk about the old job when it naturally comes up. They'll still see a coworker or two occasionally for lunch, but it's clearly not the center of their life the way that it used to be. So on the surface, this looks like the healthiest of the three, and honestly, a lot of the time it is. But I do want to push back a little bit on this idea that this group is automatically fine. Because even here, being casual about your old career doesn't mean that you've actually built something to replace it with. You can be completely relaxed talking about your old job, totally unbothered by the topic, and still feel genuinely lost on a random Tuesday, with nothing on the calendar and no idea what to do with yourself. Those two things, how you talk about your career and whether you've replaced what it gave you, they're not the same thing, even though we tend to treat them like they are. So here's the actual point I want you to take from all of three of these. How you talk about your old career isn't really the thing that matters. What matters is whether you've built a life that has purpose apart from it. You can be in any of these three camps, holding on tightly, cutting it off completely, or landing somewhere in between, and be totally fine. You can also be in any of these three camps and be quietly, privately struggling. The career talk is just the surface. Purpose is what actually underneath. And that's what we need to talk about. Here's why this happens to people who otherwise did everything right. For 30, 40 years, your career wasn't just a paycheck, it was your schedule. It was your identity when someone asked what you do. It was your sense of being needed by other people. It was your daily, built-in proof that you mattered to someone, that you contributed to something, that if you didn't show up, people would notice. Whether you talked about work at the dinner table every night, or you were the type who never once brought the office home with you, that structure was still an enormous amount of quiet, invisible work in the background of your life. It was organizing your days without you having to think about it. It was giving you a role, a place, a reason to be somewhere at a certain time, doing a certain thing that mattered to somebody else. But when you retire, that entire structure, it disappears, and usually overnight on a specific Friday. And if you haven't already built something to stand in its place, you don't just lose a job, you lose the thing that was quietly organizing your days and telling you who you were in the world. That's the real reason people who look completely, obviously ready for retirement on paper, so like great savings, paid off house, solid pension, no debt, they can still struggle emotionally in that first year or two. It was never really about the money. The money was the part they prepared for. The identity was the part nobody warned them about. So what do you actually do about this? The answer is that you have to diversify your life the same way you diversify a portfolio. Deliberately, on purpose, and ideally well before you actually need to. Think about it this way. If your entire sense of purpose is sitting in one single asset, your career, then retiring is essentially liquidating your whole portfolio into cash overnight and hoping that it works out. Nobody would recommend that you do that with your investments, and the same logic applies here. You need other things already in place before that one big asset disappears. New groups you're part of, new friendships that have nothing to do with your old industry, your old title, or your old coworkers. New hobbies you've actually started. Not ones that you've talked about starting someday, not ones sitting on a list somewhere, but ones you're doing right now, this month, while you are still working. And I want to be specific here, because go get a hobby is vague advice that doesn't actually help anybody make a decision. This isn't about filling time for the sake of filling time. It's about finding places where you're known for something other than your old job title. Places where you contribute, where you're building a skill, where people would genuinely notice if you didn't show up next week. That's what a career quietly gave you for 30 or 40 years. And that's precisely what has to get replaced. Not busy work, something real. That could be volunteering somewhere that actually uses your skills that you already have. It could be a local group tied to a hobby you never had time for. It could be mentoring younger people in your field on your own terms, without the politics of actually working there anymore. It could be something physical, like a golf league, hiking group, pickleball league, where you show up on a schedule and see the same faces. The specific activity matters less than whether it gives you 3 things a career used to give you automatically. A reason to show up, people who'd notice if you didn't, and a sense that you're good at something. But here's the part that really matters. The people I've seen make this transition they typically started before they retired. Not because they suddenly had extra time. They didn't. They were still working full-time. Sometimes they were still traveling for work. But because building those connections while you still have structure around you, while you're still busy, it's a lot easier than trying to build them completely from scratch in the middle of a wide open calendar with nothing else pulling at you. Waiting until retirement day to start figuring out your purpose is waiting until the absolute last possible moment to solve the hardest part of the entire transition. It's like waiting until the day you retire to start thinking about your investment allocation. Technically, you can do it then. It's just a much harder problem to solve under pressure than it would have been if you started building it 2 or 3 years earlier, a little bit at a time. If you're in a position to do it, one of the most underused tools here is staying in on some part-time capacity for a while instead of trying to retire all at once on a specific date. Fully stopping cold turkey can absolutely work for some people, so some personalities, they really do better with a clean break. But for a lot of people, ripping off that bandage all at once when it's attached to 30 or 40 years of identity, it doesn't actually heal faster. It just makes everything hurt at the same time instead of spreading it out. So part-time work, consulting for your old company or a new one, mentoring younger employees, sitting on a board, picking up occasional project work in your field, any of these can let you step down gradually instead of falling off a cliff on a Friday afternoon. It gives you real built-in time to build the other pieces in your life, the groups, the friendships, the hobbies we just talked about, while you're still leaning on some of that old structure to keep you anchored. And then, by the time you do fully retire, you're not starting from zero, you've already got something else standing under you. In the transition, it feels like a step down rather than just a complete fall. This is actually one of the most important parts of the planning conversations that we have with clients. Knowing that you can afford to retire, it's important. But talking through what retirement is actually going to look like on a day-to-day basis is even more so. Because a plan that only answers financial questions and skips that one, it's not a real complete plan. I'm Andrew Matz, a financial planner at Oak Road Wealth Management, and we specialize on helping pre-retirees and retirees who've got $1 to $2 million saved. And our whole approach is built on helping people create a retirement that's not just financially sound, but actually confident and purposeful. That includes the money side, of course, but honestly, some of the most important conversations that we have with clients are the ones that sound a lot like what we just talked about today. If any part of this, the 3 reactions, the identity question, the part-time idea, hit a little bit close to home, that's worth a real conversation, not just a video. I've got the link to schedule an introductory call down in the description below to see if we might be a good fit for each other. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Please look out for the next video and please subscribe to our channel.